Hello there. So, my name is Luigi. No, not that one. Ah, there we go. You might be here on this channel because you saw one of my musical compositions. Or you saw the old animations I used to do a long time ago. Or maybe this is your first video. If that's the case, welcome. We would be honored if you could join us. Speaking of stuff I used to do a long time ago, 2022 is a very special year for me because it marks my 10th anniversary of writing music. Back in 2012, I was in 8th grade and surprisingly, I knew how to do quite a lot of things. I knew a bit of how to do stop motion animation, how to use Blender, how to use GIMP, how to do machinimas and Gmod, how to edit videos, and I was quite good at using RPG Maker also. By the way, my whole bumpy journey of making games also deserves a video in itself at some point. Not bad for an 8th grader, I say. It was a lot of video related stuff too. In fact, at the time my dream job was surely going to be something related to making movies. Here's the important bit though. One of my other hobbies was drumming. I was taking drum lessons and at around March or April 2012, I thought to myself, hey, I can already read drum sheet music pretty well. Is like reading actual music any different? Spoiler alert, it's not. So I asked my drum teacher about it, and turns out, yeah, since I already knew how to read rhythms, all I had to do was learn how to read notes and stuff. Pretty cool. A surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. And so my music making journey begun. Okay, it wasn't that smooth. First of all, that same drum professor I had at the time was the one teaching me theory. But let's just say he wasn't very good at it. Not to throw shade on him, of course. I didn't understand much past where the notes are in the staff, what the clefs do, what the accidentals mean, etc. So eventually I got burnt out from playing drums and quit my lessons for a while. But I didn't stop writing music, I just couldn't. I liked it too much, I never stopped. For some reason, the idea of making music that sounded good to me was very appealing. Now, if you make music too, tell me, which software did you start with? FL Studio? Ableton Live maybe, or Reaper? Remember that back in 2012, information about anything related to making music was pretty hard to find online. There just wasn't enough content. Whereas if you look up, well, anything related to making music nowadays, you will find a ton of videos, from music theory to advanced theory, or how to use the software, etc. What I'm trying to say is that at the time I couldn't just look this stuff up on YouTube and learn as I go. And the communities for every music making software were smaller and very hard to find. You had to know what you were doing, and I did not. Oh, hi Mark. So, back to that previous question. Most people when they start out, they use FL Studio or something. My first tracks were actually made on, I kid you not, Minecraft Noteblock Studio.
Oh man.
I can explain. So, being a total media and music nerd just wasn't enough for me. I was, and am, also a big game nerd. I must have played hundreds of all kinds of games at this point. At the time I was playing a lot of Minecraft as well as a lot of other people. In Minecraft there are these things called note blocks that when you punch them, they play a note. You can change the pitch of the note, and depending on where you place the block, the timbre also changes. But actually making music with these things was very unpractical and time consuming. Plus I was never that good at stone. Here comes Minecraft Noteblock Studio, a program designed to facilitate music creation in Minecraft. You create your music in it, export it, and you can open inside the game. What was really cool about this piece of software is that it actually doubles as a MIDI sequencer. So you can literally make any music you want, export it as MIDI, then open it in one of those websites that converts MIDI to MP3. That's how I've made my first tracks ever. And when I figured that out by myself, it blew my mind. Although the resulting music might not blow your mind. Here it is, my first track ever. I was actually looking to make a track from my little RPG Maker project, and that was it. I mean, it's not good, but it's not terrible either, I suppose. It's pretty repetitive, it has some harmony, surprisingly, but almost no bass. The next track I made around that same time period was music for a boss fight for that same RPG Maker project. At the time I was also playing Crisis Core in my PSP, and there was a track in this game I was heavily inspired by. Can you hear the difference? Basically, looking at all these tracks I made at the time, a lot of them were about me trying to emulate things I was already hearing, which is good practice even for more experienced composers. I can't claim it to do it very well though, till this day, despite my countless hours of ear training.
Thanks a lot, Mingus.
I guess me emulating already existing stuff at the time had also a lot to do with me learning the software and figuring it out what to do, which is how I still learn music software to this day. Project-based learning is king. Hail to the king, baby. Some time passes, and at around early to mid 2013, I get to know enough FL Studio to write my first ever classical piece in it. And it's one I actually quite like till this day. It's pretty atonal, because at that point I still knew very little harmony, so I just composed it by ear mostly. I remember writing the initial parts on paper in class, and then going home and finishing it in the computer, which is something I did for a long time, especially through high school. But there was sort of a problematic side to this. Over time, I started to think that composing stuff completely on paper was the legit way to compose, and that isn't true at all. Every way of composing has its advantages and disadvantages, and you have to figure them out by yourself to yourself. The advantage of writing straight from your head or your instrument into the paper is that you end up practicing your inner ear a lot. The disadvantage is that if you're like me, most of the time there will be a big difference between what was in your head and what's in the paper, and that can be very frustrating, not to mention is really slow. I learned a lot from the time I composed using pen and paper, but it resulted in way too many unfinished projects. Because of this, late 2013 to early 2015 was the time which I finished the least amount of music, and I created a habit of never finishing stuff, which is something I'm still fighting to get over to this day. If my experience can serve as a guide for starting composers, is that the best way to compose is whichever way develops your skill and gives you results. There's no point in clinging to a method in which you're constantly improving but never having tangible results, stuff to post or to show to friends, etc. There's also no point in clinging to a method in which you're always pumping out tracks but they don't challenge you, or are very similar in some ways. And unfortunately, you are the one who has to try various methods out, be creative and find out what works best for you. That's just a normal part of becoming a composer. In fact, that's just a normal part of becoming any sort of creative person, is to find out what works for you and what doesn't. There are things I can suggest, but that's probably a different video in itself. So I think we should get back to the retrospective now. Late 2014 is also an important date for me. It's when I began taking music theory classes again with the late Ricardo da Costa Leão, bless his soul. And I learned about a channel called Orchestration Online by the great Thomas Goss. Thanks, YouTube recommended. Very cool. That was the channel that inspired me to begin learning how to write orchestral music. That was also the time I bought a bunch of books on orchestration, counterpoint, harmony, etc. Basically, parallel to my basic theory classes, I was also studying all these topics on my own, without my teacher knowing about it, which was kind of funny looking back. By early 2015, I had composed my first short orchestral piece. Here's a bit of it. It's not bad, and it's a considerable amount of progress from the nothing I was getting the past year. I also wrote this little waltz in class, which in terms of orchestration is quite simple, but it was fun to write nonetheless. Do I even have this uploaded? Oh, it's in my SoundCloud. Oh, you didn't know I had a SoundCloud that you can follow and listen to stuff that isn't on this channel? Wow! By late 2015, I was confident enough as a composer to participate in my first ever composition competition. I felt confident, but was I ready? I don't know. Now, if you submitted to a composition competition before, you'll probably know the trouble it is. There's usually an expensive submission fee, very specific instrumentation, minimum and maximum duration, etc., which makes it really difficult to find a competition that fits the music you are already writing or already have written. And composing stuff specifically for a competition is usually not worth it, unless you're getting in without thinking of winning. They can also be a lot of fun and very challenging, but again, if you enter a competition hoping to win them, you will not have a good time. I didn't know any of that at the time, so I submitted to the competition that most fit what I was trying to compose at the time, and it was the second Karol Szymanowski competition from Poland. I spent quite a while composing for orchestra, day and night, to be able to ship the piece before the deadline. Yes, I had to mail stuff to them instead of submitting it electronically, and I quite enjoyed the results despite not being particularly excited about it today. I have never heard back from the competition, so I don't know even if it got there on time. What a shame. Here's a bit of the piece. I participated in a competition in 2016 also, the Basel Composition Competition in Switzerland. But after a while I started to lose interest in writing for competitions, so that was the last one I took part in, at least for now. 2016 in general is perhaps the most important year for me compositionally. At around July to August 2016 I finished my first ever game OST, Bloodline. Then I went to the US to finish high school. That was really fun, because it was when I was first introduced to writing and playing jazz. You like jazz? In early 2017 in the US, I also picked up the trombone as a second instrument, and that really helped me later on because of how many performance opportunities there were compared to drum set. Then I came back to São Paulo after graduating high school, got accepted in music school there, played trombone on a street band. You should follow them on Spotify, by the way, link in the description. Had private classes on electronic music, and eventually I got into Berkeley, and I didn't stop writing, ever. And that's pretty much my story of writing music, from 2012 up to today. Today's challenges are more about me learning how to be more productive on my own, because being productive when you have a deadline or when it's homework is easy. But when there's nothing to guide you towards a goal, you need to have some sort of discipline. I'm also learning to integrate other non-music related stuff that I want to do in my life. I have a huge bunch of stuff I want to do, both in and outside writing music, and I need to learn to organize myself to do them. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for sticking around, make sure to like the video, subscribe, all that stuff. That helps me a lot. It's also my first video speaking on the mic, so if it sounds awkward, it's because it is. I'm reading from a script. There's no way I can do that without a script. At least for now. It's important to me that this channel grows, even if just a little. I need to get a bit more known, basically, that's my perception. And there's also more stuff underway, so that's something to look forward to. So that's it, guys. Thank you and keep on writing.